go. Because who walks in to testify? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe. And if you're old here, hello again. My name is Kate and I post new true crime videos every Friday at 3 p.m. This case is a little different but quite interesting. It's the case of how someone was catfished into murdering 2 people. So with that said, let's get into it. So this case takes place in Mountain City, Tennessee, and our main kind of player in this case is Janelle Potter. Janelle was in her late 20s at the time, and she had suffered with a lot of health issues from when she was a child, and it massively impacted her development. So because of this, she was described to be naive and innocent and kind of had like the mental capacity of like an 8-year-old, and she still spoke and acted like she was way younger than she actually was. Now, because of this, her parents were actually quite overprotective. They had a lot of rules in place and she followed them pretty strictly. You know, there'd be no partying, they had access to her Facebook, no going out after 12 p.m, all these kind of things. Now, Janelle was described to be socially awkward in person, but she actually was a lot more confident behind a computer screen, which a lot of people are. I don't think that's all that unusual, but that paired with her kind of childlike mental capacity and stuff, it made it quite hard for her to make friends. But she had her lucky day one day when she went to the local pharmacy, and she was actually befriended by the girl that worked there, and this woman's name was Tracy. And this Tracy actually set Janelle up with her cousin Jamie Curd. She said it was kind of to help them both out. Like, she obviously didn't have a boyfriend, he didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so she just kind of wanted to just sort them out, you know? But obviously, because Janelle's parents were so strict, they wouldn't have allowed her to have a boyfriend, or they wouldn't have been happy about it at least. So Janelle and Jamie did become an item, but they kept it a secret. So Jamie would like come over to Janelle's house and like be fixing their computer or whatever. Obviously, it was difficult to maintain a relationship when it had to remain a secret. So Jamie actually gave Janelle a mobile phone, so they could secretly be on the phone, they could secretly text, and Janelle's parents would be none the wiser. But all the while during this relationship, Janelle had a secret crush on somebody else. And this man was Billy Payne, who was actually the brother of Tracy from the pharmacy. So he would have also been Jamie's cousin. Billy Payne was this outdoorsy guy, bit of a jokester, you know, but that was the situation. She was with this guy Jamie, but she did have a secret crush on Billy, so keep that in mind. Obviously, Janelle was spending a lot of time online, and soon she actually started getting cyberbullied really badly. Like, she had haters coming out of everywhere, calling her all kinds of names and threatening horrible things to her. And she had a theory of who they were coming from. She suspected it was all coming from this girl, Billie Jean Hayworth. Now, Billie Jean was actually engaged to Billy Payne, and they were living together and they had a 7-month-old son together. Also, I'm gonna call Billy Payne Bill from now on, just so that it doesn't get confusing, because Billie Jean is the female of the relationship and Billy Payne is the male of the relationship, so I'll just call them Billie Jean and Bill. Now, Janelle actually believed that Billie Jean was jealous of her looks, but what was actually happening was Janelle was really jealous of Billie Jean because she was engaged to the guy that Janelle liked. So a lot of tension started building, tension turned into conflict, and conflict turned into this massive feud. They would call each other horrible names, they would threaten each other, particularly Billie Jean would threaten Janelle. And actually one time Janelle even said she wished Bill, Billie Jean, and that damn baby would die. But obviously this feud was all virtual, it was all based online, until it escalated. Things just got a bit more heated. Bill and Billie Jean actually threw rocks onto the Potters' property, and just little things like that. It just started getting to a point where Janelle was quite afraid. She had rang the police a few times saying, look, I'm very sick and this is getting kind of scary. I don't know, I don't feel safe, all this kind of stuff. And eventually it just got to the point where they all unfriended each other. And I couldn't find the dates of when this feud came to a halt, which is quite frustrating because it would be very interesting to see, because the next thing we hear, on the 31st of January 2012, Billie Jean Hayworth and Billy Payne are found dead in their home. They had single gunshots to their faces, and Bill's throat was actually slashed in his bed, and Billie Jean had actually been cradling their baby when she died. Side note, the baby was unharmed and survived absolutely fine, so no harm done to the baby. They were found by a friend who had discovered the back door to be open, and their friend also said on the 911 call that they looked as if they had been beaten up, like their faces were black and blue. When the police started investigating, they actually found little to no evidence at the crime scene. There were no fingerprints, no shell casings, no DNA whatsoever. It seemed to be quite a professional job, as morbid as that is. So the day after the murders, Chief Deputy Officer went and interviewed the Potters in their home, because obviously the police knew that there was this feud going on. Janelle had called them several times, so they were aware that, you know, there was conflict there. By the way, Janelle was obviously still in that secret relationship with Jamie at the time, and obviously Jamie had connections to both sides. Like, Billy Payne was his cousin and Janelle was his girlfriend, but he did take Janelle's side. Authorities did have him do a polygraph test, and he failed miserably. When he was asked if he knew the identity of Bill and Billie Jean's killer, he obviously said no, and it came up as a blatant lie. Obviously, polygraph tests aren't all that accurate, but definitely something to be aware of. And another weird thing, when he was being interviewed by the police, in the middle of his interview, he asked, "Is the CIA here?" So obviously they found this really unusual, but then we find out why. Jamie had been supposedly texting this guy Chris from the CIA, and Chris would essentially protect Janelle at all costs. So that's kind of weird, isn't it? Like, just why would someone in the CIA be protecting some family over some feud in like a really small town? It's just kind of strange. But after 6 hours of interrogation, Jamie told police that Marvin, Janelle's dad, killed them. So they got Jamie to call Marvin and try and get a confession on tape, and I'll read out what they said to each other. So Jamie says, "Well, they're pointing fingers." Marvin says, "Oh, Jiminy Christmas." I can't say that without laughing. Jamie says, "You got rid of everything that was from Bill's, didn't you?" Marvin says, "Uh-huh." Jamie says, "Okay, that makes me feel a lot better." So it wasn't exactly like a full-on confession, but it was enough for the police to go and arrest Marvin. So when he was initially brought in for questioning, he denied everything. He was very closed off, and he just said, "Look, I'm not going to tell you that I did something I didn't do, so have at it." After a bit of time, the police changed their interrogation strategy, and they took a bit more of an empathetic approach. They were like, "Look, we understand that your daughter has been abused online, she's been bullied. It must be so hard as a father to see your child go through that, you know?" And Marvin's response was basically, they've threatened all their lives, they've threatened to cut Janelle's head off and do horrible things to her. So they were kind of breaking down the walls here. He was opening up a little bit. He was like, "Yeah, I am sick and tired of it," basically, you know? He then became quite emotional, and he said that he had actually heard them plotting to murder Janelle. But as things escalated in the interrogation, the police asked him, "Do Janelle and Barbara being his wife, Janelle's mother, know what you did?" He said, "No." So again, getting closer and closer to a confession. So the police then allowed him to call Barbara. And on this phone call, he said, "Look, I don't want you to hear this from anyone else. I want to tell you myself, and I was involved in it. I did it." So there's your confession. But Barbara then actually didn't believe him. I don't know if this was a denial thing. It kind of sounds like that to me, but she did actually raise a good point. And that was that at the time, Marvin was having very bad health issues. He was on oxygen and a lot of medication. And in the interrogation, they didn't have any oxygen for him. They didn't have his medication. So Barbara claims that without these for a few hours, he starts saying things like that don't make sense or that are incorrect. So that rattles things up a little bit. But the police then got a search warrant for the Potter's house. And this is where this was, my jaw dropped 10 times in a row. As soon as they got into the house, they found a lot of guns. I'm talking 60 guns. They were hidden in the corners, they were under mattresses, in the drawers and the dressers and things like that. Who has 60 firearms in their house? Like, there was even an ammo belt hanging over Marvin's oxygen tank. I found that kind of interesting because it's like, if it's on top of the oxygen tank, it's like he uses the ammo belt more than the oxygen tank, you know? But anyway, they also had knives everywhere. And there were also pictures of the victims in the living room. All the pictures appeared to be ripped in half, and they found bags upon bags of shredded documents in the Potter's car. So one lucky police officer had the very monotonous job of putting these hundreds of pages together. My eye! So these documents were actually emails between Barbara and Chris. Remember Chris from the CIA? He claimed to be there to protect Janelle and her parents. He said he was watching their every move in order to protect them, and he said he was watching Bill and Billie Jean's every move. Again, just like, why would someone in the CIA care? Like, things get very interesting from here on, so pay attention. Obviously, police had seized a lot of things in the house when they carried out the search, and one of these things was Janelle's computer. And this is when they had a eureka moment. The emails from Chris were coming from Janelle's IP address. So she was catfishing her parents from the same house, probably even from the same computer. But in these emails between Barbara and Chris, it became very clear that Barbara was just done with the feud. She was sick and tired of people throwing rocks at her house. So she even said, "Nobody wants to kill, but we will." Police had, of course, seized Janelle's phone as well, the one that Jamie had given her. And interestingly enough, she had actually been texting Jamie in the early hours of the morning on the day that Bill and Billie Jean were killed. At 4:39 a.m, Janelle says, "Yes, he's leaving. I can hear the car now." A little bit later, she sends another one saying, "I love you. Text me ASAP when you get back." And it was at 5 a.m. that Marvin would go and pick Jamie up, and they would go to Bill and Billie Jean's house and commit the murders. I gotta say, that's pretty ballsy of Janelle. Like, I'm gonna catfish my parents and have them murder people. That's obviously what it looks like at the moment, but we still have the trials to get through. Marvin confessed to the murders and he got 2 life sentences, eligible for parole in 2131, which is 111 years from now. Jamie, who was obviously the accomplice, got a plea deal and managed to get away with just 25 years. Then Barbara and Janelle were both arrested for first-degree murder. And during Janelle's trial, there was a bit of an ooh, because who walks in to testify? Chris. Turns out he was actually a former classmate of Janelle, and they hadn't seen each other for over 15 years, but he seemed to have a very lasting impression on her because it was his identity that she stole. His pictures, even his name. Come on, like basic catfishing knowledge is not to use the person's name. But while he was testifying, Janelle just couldn't take her eyes off him. She was just like, well, Jesus, she wasn't like that, but you know, she just was looking at him. But essentially in the trial, the prosecutors had a tough time actually linking Janelle and Barbara to first-degree murder because there was no evidence of them ever being at the crime scene. But the jury found them guilty. So they're off to prison and they're eligible for parole in 2071. At that point, Barbara would be 120 years old and Janelle would be 90. It's not looking great for them. That brings me to the end of this case. I think this one just really highlights the fact that social media is not always a safe place, and be careful who you speak bad about, but ultimately, like, just be kind to each other as well. There are so many hateful and hurtful messages and comments sent to people that cause them to do harm to either themselves or others, sometimes even resulting in death. What's that quote from Mean Girls? "I wish I could bake a cake filled with rainbows and smiles and we could all just eat and be happy." She's not wrong. But yeah, if you have something kind to say, say it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a like. Comment down below what you thought of this one. I upload every Friday at 3 p.m. and I also have a case suggestion form in the description. So if there's anything in particular you want me to cover, have a look. Also, my Instagram is katephilpott_YT. I don't think I've mentioned that on here before, so there you go. But yeah, thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.